Hi, and welcome to the Days Gone podcast. I'm Claire Weaver, a screenwriter, author, and Days Gone fan, and this podcast is a place to discuss the game in all its glory, share my opinions, both popular and unpopular, and listen to me fangirl over one of the best games ever made. There will be spoilers ahead, so continue at your own risk. Welcome to the Freak Show. Before we get started, I have a couple quick reminders. Weekdays at 8 a.m. Mountain Time, you can watch me live stream my Days Gone playthrough. I take on hordes, talk shit about rippers, and lay waste to ambush camps, all before I've had my morning cup of coffee. You can find me on my YouTube channel, just search for Days Gone Podcast. I'm also a guest on the Spornicus Rex YouTube channel on Tuesdays at 8 p.m. Mountain Time. We're currently playing through one of my favorite franchises of all time, the Uncharted games. And an announcement, the Days Gone community now has a Discord server. Please come, hang out, and join the conversation. All right, let's get into it. In this very special episode, I am elated to be talking with none other than the director of Days Gone, Jeff Ross. Hi, Jeff. How are you doing today?
Good, Claire. It's nice to be here. Thanks.
Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast.
It's my pleasure. My pleasure, 100%.
So you must be sick of talking about Days Gone by now. Is this just going to be a hi and bye and we're done?
No, I'm not sick of it, but also I am sick of it at the same time. At a certain point you have to move on with your life and everything. And I have, but I do think that there's still some kind of insights and lessons and kind of, some things that we learned along the way that, might be interesting to somebody or maybe even helpful for some people if they're kind of at certain parts of their career or stuck in a mode of development. So, I love talking about it, but I love talking about it a lot less these days because it's been 3 years and, I've moved on for a while, but it still holds a really special place in my heart. So I'm happy to chat about it whenever.
Yeah. And it was 7 years in the making?
7, yeah.
7, wow.
I know, it's so insane. To say it's a full 7 years on Days Gone is a bit false. But we started kind of in March of 2012, I believe. It was right after Golden Abyss came out, and for nearly a year, I would say about 8 to 9 months, we spent time just kind of churning through ideas. There were all kinds of ideas for the type of game that we would make next, and none of them were taking. We had some pretty good traction on like a procedural horror game, and then it turned out that until Dawn, I keep getting the name screwed up. Until Dawn was going to come out, and so we're like, oh, that's there's some portfolio issues. Then we created this machine kind of robot city game, and then there was Horizon. It was so it was really tough to find something that we liked and we felt was in our wheelhouse that was also something that didn't clash with the portfolio. So which is kind of weird too, because one of the things. The things about Days Gone is it's inadvertent, but it's heavily influenced by Last of Us. You can just tell that there's a lot there's a lot of things that are completely unique and different about each game, but there's just some aesthetic things that kind of that kind of make them very very similar enough to in a weird way for the same publisher to have them both. And I think that at the time it wasn't apparent to everybody that that's what that was going to be, but I think ultimately that's why the sequel probably got put on the back burner.
I mean, honestly, that's probably the nature of the genre that you have. I mean, you're I know they're not zombies, but it's the zombie genre, and same as The Last of Us is like they're the infected, but they're still essentially it's the zombie subgenre of horror. So you have things like tropes and ways of articulating that genre that you have to hit for it to live in that genre. So there are going to be similarities to other games, but Days Gone has its own voice, has its own style.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, no, and I contend that. I'm just saying superficially, it's easy to kind of compare it to the other one, but no, right. There's a lot different there, and The Last of Us 1 is one of my all-time favorite games, and 2 is just brilliant. So it's good company to be in, and yet vastly different game loops for sure.
Right. Yeah, it's never a bad day when you're compared to The Last of Us.
Yeah, I'll take it.
So before we get kind of too into the weeds with Days Gone specifically, I want to talk about the job of game director. What exactly does that entail? Because it sounds very grandiose, very all-encompassing, but How would you describe it?
Yeah, it's definitely not all encompassing. And with most jobs in this industry, there's no one definition that works across studios and across titles. So for Bend Studio, what it meant at the time that I was there, and I was the first game director for the studio. It had historically been just creative and technical director. And when we started Days Gone, we were at about 6 designers, and when we at our peak we were at 28. So basically, and I was just a senior, as a senior designer on the team when we started this, and eventually got promoted to lead, and we promoted another person to co-lead, and we kind of ran the game for a while. But what really started to happen was, as the team grew and as the project got much more massive, we really needed to kind of like create a professional workforce, take the design team and bring it up to, grow it, but also, start to find people who can become leaders or managers and kind of help guide. And so for me, it was a parallel game side direction where I'll get to that in a minute, but the other half of it was full-time design management of up to 28 designers on the studio. And so on that end, what I did was kind of come in and looked at how art was working. And I'm like, well, design just has a department. It just says designers, but art, they've got animators, they've got riggers, they've got tech art, they've got all these kind of sub-disciplines that really make a lot of sense and kind of help people understand the role of each kind of sub team or what people bring. And, that just made perfect sense to kind of emulate a form of that. And, we already had some of the key members of all these teams, but I just formalized everything and said, all right, we have a technical design team and they're responsible for this. We have the mission design team and they're responsible for this, the open world team, and then we have the systems and gameplay teams, and the narrative design too. So, just kind of doing that, was pretty galvanizing, because now we had people who were leads in charge of these things, and so it just kind of went from this kind of like college buddy, kind of weekend game jam mindset to, oh no, this is, we're all professionals now. We have to really we're responsible for people. We're responsible for deadlines and have to hit them. So there was that part of it. And it's actually one of the things I'm kind of most proud about my work on Days Gone, was doing that, because it in and of itself was a more than a full-time job, just doing that. But then on the other side, I had to do this game direction where, the job of game director in this context was, Garvin's got a vision, and I kind of helped him shape that. I've always been a very close confidant for him, but you can fill his head with a lot of information and then hope he takes some of your advice, and he does, but he's got a pretty strong vision unto himself. But we had this strong vision from John. He had written, I think, pretty much all of the cinematics and most of the missions even before I was game director. So, I had to kind of just look at it and say, all right, how the hell am I going to make a game out of all this? How are we going to break it down? How are we going to kind of achieve this scale? And I really I do kind of equate it to, there's the architect of a house, and then there's the general contractor who goes off and builds it, and I think that's probably still the best way to describe that relationship. And, and certainly at the start of the project, he's busier than I am, but as the project goes on, we kind of like cross paths, and then while I'm finishing the game, he gets to go on press tours and stuff like that. So, while I'm stuck there trying to work on the day one patch.
And he's talking up all the amazing things that you're still like tearing your hair out. Like, we can't, I don't know how to get that done. How are we going to pull this off? You said that John had a vision for it. I want to talk a little bit about the origins of Days Gone and how it was originally envisioned and how it was pitched. What was the starting point for the game?
I can't remember the one moment, but because there were a series of discrete events that kind of built towards what it was. And I think after about 9 months after us doing those other prototypes, you go back to 2012 and Walking Dead was still king. Sons of Anarchy was still kind of like king on TV. And they were shows that we were watching. And all I knew was I wanted to make an open world zombie game. That was, first of all, I wanted to make an open world game. And I convinced them to do that. And then zombies, because hell yeah, I'm having so much fun watching this show. Wouldn't it be cool to kind of like, when they're in the prison and they have to decide, they're living in the prison, they've got their day stuff, and then they realize they have to go out and search for resources, accomplish some goals, and then they bring the shit down on the prison and their community as a result. And I'm like, that's an open world game loop of some sort. Like there's got to be a way for us to kind of recapture that idea. And then at one point, when my office was next to John's, I was in my office and I was trying to figure out what, if we're making it in an open world, how could we be a little bit different, but in a way that is attainable for us from a scope point of view. And looking at Grand Theft Auto, they've got all these vehicles and they're all kind of unique assets and they're all individually tuned and pretty good for what they are. But right away we knew that was out of scope for us. So I'm like, what can we do to give the player a vehicle that doesn't open up this this mess of all these assets we would need? And it dawned on me, because we had crafting. I'm like, what if he could build a motorcycle or no, build a bike? Any type of two-wheeled vehicle. We would, the game would have been about finding parts for, finding bicycle parts, finding car parts, truck parts, and they would all be kind of suited to crafting into from a pedal bicycle to to all the way up to a motorcycle. And at about the same time, I sat down to talk with John, and he's like, I think we should make this a biker game. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. And he's like, no, it's Sons of Anarchy biker. And I'm just like, yeah. I'm like, well, what I was just thinking about in my office was this. So it was like a kind of, we both had the same idea, generally at the same time, and kind of, I think that was pretty galvanizing. It was something that really kind of told us, like, it was a chocolate peanut butter moment.
It's like you came in with the gameplay point of view of how are we navigating the world, while John is sitting there coming up with a who's the main character kind of point of view, like who is this about? And the two, just like you say, the chocolate and peanut butter, the perfect combination, just kind of clicked.
Yeah.
Wasn't there at some point a decision tree structure to the game?
There was, and I think even up to 1 year before we came out, we had that Game Informer. There's this Game Informer hour-long playthrough, the first part of the game, and there were a couple choice moments in there that were things we thought that they were going to be good, or was something that we could ship with. But really, what happened was, as we played it, and I started to kind of tune, these 15 events in the game that would be inputs into the, what this system was going to go somewhere. You were making these decisions, and it was going to have an outcome, and that outcome was Boozer was going to die if his emotional ebb and flow, if it was too ebby at the end. So great idea, a way to, and it would have been great if we could have hit it, but the real problem was there was no way to really frame the choices in a way where the players could even perceive this dire out, this really shitty potential outcome. And we just kind of figured, and we didn't get UX feedback saying this. This was John and I really kind of just hashing it out, saying, are we going to piss people off too much by giving them this power, but not teaching them how to use it or explain what it is? And then it's going to have this real bummer of an outcome. And the way that I was tuning it wasn't like Boozer was going to die if you failed. It was more like, no, Boozer's going to die unless you succeed. It kind of, dominating the system.
That was the against all odds. You could maybe have him live, but the chances are greater that he would die.
Yeah, we were totally hoping for that. Since this would have been the one one dynamic element of it, we were really looking forward to the water cooler things where everybody knows Boozer died, but then the one guy's like, "What are you guys talking about?" Like he lived. He was with me at Lost Lake. Now after the game, what did you guys do? Just that kind of water cooler moment, the Reddit churn, the stuff that Reddit would churn on forever. We were going for that, but it was just, we had weak inputs. Myself and John, we had a lot of ideas and we put them in, but they just weren't weighty enough in their sum total to kind of lead to that type of result. So it was a very tough thing to remove for us. And if the public had never seen that first hour played, they never would have known. But the game would have been fine. But that was us trying to do something special and unique, but also then being very mindful of the community and the integrity of the story.
Yeah. It seems like you almost would want more than just two outcomes, more than just binary.
Exactly.
If you're going to give people that power of making decisions, you kind of want it to be ridiculously complicated and have lots of different outcomes, but that changes the nature of the game.
It does, but it's still a viable game that somebody can make someday, and it's something where, in order for us to have pulled this off, we would have needed, and if I could go back 8 years or 9 years, however long ago it was when we started, it would have been about building that kind of that world of a bunch of choices that the player is making, so that the prominent key choices are kind of masked by the others. When you get one choice and it matters, you're going to choose the best option. But what the Telltale games have shown me is, just have the player respond. Not everything, give the player a chance to express themselves, and not everything has to pay off with big drastic changes. It can just pay off with a line of dialogue later, or sometimes even not paying off at all, but in the moment giving me some tension that kind of that engrosses me in their story further. So I'm a huge fan of those games, and I think that, yeah, you can't just dip your foot in the water. You have to dive all the way in if you're gonna try something like that.
Yeah. What were some of the other stages of development ideas that were, thrown away early on? Can you talk a little bit about the development process of the game?
Yeah, it's so long ago. I can't even remember. We honestly didn't throw away a lot of stuff. We probably should have. Obviously, the game was pretty big, but I think that that's one of the cooler
Wait,
parts
wait,
about
wait,
the
wait,
game.
wait. Wait, wait. I have to stop you there. No, probably should have. No, you should not throw in any of it. Like, it's perfect. Don't
Yeah,
don't say that.
Claire, the game spoke to you really well, and then I love that you did that. It didn't speak to everybody that way, and kind of one of the things I think, again, if I had this wonderful time machine, we really would have gone back and tried to figure out a way to tighten up episode one to make sure that people can get to the kind of the really significant story stuff at Lost Lake. But it was our first game. It was our first open world game that was this big, and it to the scope. I totally, I stand by my statement, but I also love the Bollywood aspect of it. I really feel like Days Gone is this huge Bollywood, just insanely big. And when you think it's over, it keeps going, and it's kind of epic, and it's kind of got, not every moment is, it is, they're not all even. But yeah, no, I love the size and the scope of it, but I think it could have had a better commercial land or critical landing if it had a tighter kind of episode one, I think. So, and they say that you cut your way towards better score in games, and I do think that that's true. But we did cut some stuff, but I don't think anything key, and partially because for the first 3 years we didn't even know what the game was in terms of kind of like we're like, yeah, we're making an open world zombie game. We got all this story stuff, but the kind of figuring out what the identity of our game's open world would be was really kind of paramount to me. And I had convinced the studio to make an open world game, predicated on the idea that making a game set in a rural location, we didn't have to build up as much geometry and points of interest and city structures. We could just kind of use the landscape and show Mother Nature. That would be easier to make than the same amount of square footage for cities. So convince them to do that. Convince them it should be zombies, but I had no idea what the game was going to be. Like that's one of those things where you be careful what you wish for because you might get it. And then I'm like, what is this? So I was just driving through our world all the time, trying to think about like, all right, if I'm in this position in this role of this character, what would I be afraid of? What would I be expecting? What would I be trying to do? And that was the start of the dangerous world kind of thing. And I didn't come up with that phrase; somebody else did.
This
But
world comes for you.
this world comes for you, the dangerous world. It was this thing that I forget who coined it. It might have been marketing or it might have been Garvin, but it was trying to kind of describe what this idea was, which was really find a way to capture and deliver on the fantasy of a zombie fan, just like I was for The Walking Dead. Like if you would give me a Walking Dead game that was open world and it started at the prison, I mean, I'd give you everything I had, like, all my money. You could have it because that's the game I want to play. There's a core fantasy there. But then once I'm playing this game, I'm going to want helicopters flying overhead that have mysteries that lead to them. I'm going to want a governor character to kind of introduce himself and have the politics of these cross camps, these two camps in the same region. And so kind of using that lens, driving through the world, I'm like, well, what would happen? And then I started listening to some DayZ stories. People were having on DayZ where they would, people would come across other people in multiplayer, and they would kidnap them, they would abduct them, and they would use the tools that the game had, like you could use zip ties on people, and they were really just kind of LARPing. Is what they were doing, because the prisoner could have run, but he willingly kneeled and let them kind of handcuff him and become their prisoner. And I think they were stuffing fruit down his throat at some point. Like it was just, I'm like, yeah, that's what people do in the apocalypse. We get awful really fast, and that started to become kind of like the identity to me for what I thought our open world would be, which was people being mean to other people, like they would in the apocalypse. And we didn't even go that far with what people would really do. So kind of that lens, it brought me to the open world ambushes. the ambushes were this thing where it was, the clothesline and the sniper rifle were really the only two ideas that I had. And it was something where everybody hated it. Some people were open to it, but in general, it was the opposite of what you should do in a game. You don't take the player off his bike. You
You
don't
don't
force him off the
randomly
bike.
piss off the player by
Yeah,
throwing events at them that could
and
potentially
that's
kill
what
them.
people were arguing. And my whole take was like, for us to stand apart, we're going to have to go, we have to go big. We can't compete with Ubisoft, we can't compete with Rockstar. So for us to go big, we have to go big in things that are different, the
Mm.
small things, the things that other games aren't doing. And that's why the open world ambushes and kind of the spawning system there, it's built to kind of keep lull the player into this sense of complacency, like, oh yeah, I haven't been attacked in a while, things are pretty good. And but then every now and then they would get attacked once they kind of stopped thinking about the threats. And what that built was this really great tension when
Hmm.
you run out of gas on your bike and you have to run to get some gas, like whether something happened or whether something didn't happen on the journey, the fact that you couldn't save the game unless you were at your bike meant that you were going off and you were in, it was very dangerous for you to try anything out here, and you were super afraid, but you knew you needed to do it to get your gas and bring it back. And it's just what I learned with Days Gone was like tension is one of the people talk about fun. Fun is just a feeling that has a lot of different kind of characteristics to it. And I think that tension is a feeling, therefore it's fun, if that's what people are looking for. And really the ambushes helped us do that. And then the team came up with some other ones like the burning car one, the IEDs, and other things. So yeah, that was kind of the inspiration, was like just driving around thinking like, okay, well, A, I'm on the hook to figure this out, but B, as a fan of this genre of game, what would I want to see? What haven't I seen something else do? Or is there a way that I can take something that's been done before and kind of remix it give it a kind of new flavor for our game? That was my design philosophy and kind of thought process.
I mean, I think you absolutely fucking nailed it. I think it was amazing. That's one of the things that make the gameplay for me one of the best games I've ever played, if not the best game I've ever played. It's the fact that the world is out to get you, and it is very random. I was having a conversation on Discord earlier today with some of my gaming friends. This one guy had found by the Rogue Camp gas station, they found an abacus sitting on top of, I think it was like one of the gas pumps or something. And he was like, it's my sixth playthrough. How have I never seen this abacus sitting there before? And when I went up to it, my controller started buzzing, and I was like, dude, no. That's a trap. That's a trap. Those are like, you gonna like investigate it and then follow the little footprints and get, strung up in a snare, and someone's gonna steal all your weapons. He'd never experienced that before, or he'd never seen it at that point. And it's like every time you play, you find something new. There's like some new tripwire setup or some new place where the snipers are hanging out. Or my favorite one is down by the Patchins Lake. If you leave your bike on the road to go off and fight the Horde, you come back and there's always some little fucker messing with your bike. Someone sabotaging it right there. Or your bike just gets knocked over by a deer or a freak or something random when you're not looking. And as you're running back to your bike away from a
Expecting it to be
horde,
there ready for
and
you.
you get out, it's like, oh no, something's knocked over my bike. I get so mad. I love it. It pulls you in because it doesn't feel overdone. It's not too often that it's just mean. It's like the game's just being mean to me and wants me to fail. It's rare enough that it feels like it's just part of the world. Like, yeah, this is a fucked up world, and if you're out in the shit, anything could happen.
Yeah, and I would have loved, for a sequel or even for this game too, because I think all that stuff is true, and by not front and centering it, but not by kind of like drawing a lot of attention to these little things, it makes them a little bit more magical in my book, because they're not they're not guaranteed to be part of the mainline experience. But for the people that are playing that game, and then they're playing the game, they're grinding or they're playing in the open world, just doing those loops, we wanted to surprise them as much as possible, infinitely, kind of just make sure that they were always discovering something. And again, just something to kind of fuel online conversations or water cooler conversations at work. And as a designer, I would say that the systems, what I learned from Days Gone were systems are king. Like if you build the right systems and for the right game, then you can almost have like infinite gameplay. You can have this infinite open world churn that is compelling and interesting to people. and that gives you the opportunity to kind of put these little moments in. And like one of them was the freaker that got hit by lightning, and like that was something that was it was highly scripted, but it was doled out very systemically and under the conditions, obviously, that honored the world. It's good on higher. I think it was, I don't know what all the filters were, but basically, when it's raining and doing thunder, then that's when this event could happen. And once people started seeing that, like they were just going nuts. And I really do wish that we had a ton more of that stuff. But for the first entry in the game, it's still kind of a respectable kind of declaration of like, yeah, this is the type of game it is. This is the type of stuff it does. And if we had a sequel, there would be more of this.
Yeah. Yeah. Were there some things that you wanted to put in specifically that you couldn't for some reason?
I think that I'm a pretty pragmatic designer. It's one of my strengths and weaknesses, I think sometimes. So when I'm not trying to put it in the kitchen sink, but there were the one thing that I kept fighting for, that I knew was, I just knew I wasn't going to get the buy-in from engineering and the studio leadership, was co-op. It's like, if we
Mm.
just, if we could find a way to just let two people do this story, or shit, just even play the open world together, some form of that it would have just been cool to do a horde with a buddy. And I kept saying like, yeah, we should do that, knowing, I was very cavalier, knowing that we weren't going to do it, but I meant it, that it would have been really cool. It would have been the thing that I think took us to the next level, would have, kind of helped made it. I'm just impressed with all the people that play through it over and over and over again, right? Like this would have given them kind of more opportunities to play it with the people that they like or they love, and have a good time. So probably that, but in general, I'm a pretty reasonable guy.
There's one thing that I wanted to bring up that pointedly isn't included in the game, or not really. Rape and sexual assault is very much. There's a couple moments where it's sort of alluded to. The mission where you have to go rescue the sisters in the cabin down
Mhm.
by the lake, and you see the little flashback of one of the women being thrown on the bed, and then she stabs her attacker, and they both end up dying. But there isn't really much in the way of like overt sexual assault, rape, which is something that would definitely be happening in this brutal world. Like, as you
Yeah.
described, the people in this world are bad and mean and horrible to each other. Was that a conscious decision to not include it? Is that just a natural decision? Basically, how did it not get included?
Well, nobody, I talk about the apocalypse, and this sounds kind of messed up. I think that there's a fantasy about the apocalypse that we all have. People that want to watch, people like myself who watch The Walking Dead, we have this little inner monologue that says, if I were there, I would do this and I would totally survive, and these guys are idiots and blah blah blah. And so for me, that's what I wanted to capture about the apocalypse, was the things that were the interesting direct apocalypse kind of social changes. Yes, sexual assault and rape, we know that will happen right away in real life. It's just, that's what happens. There was no there for us. There was nothing warm and fuzzy about it as an element. There was no social commentary that we wanted. We didn't want to. We couldn't make any social commentary on it. It wasn't our place. A couple of white dudes making all these decisions, kind of like, it wasn't necessarily our place. I guess you could argue that maybe that should have come from us, but it just wasn't what we were trying to. We weren't trying to make a social. We weren't trying to make a social statement. And I think that if a game is going to use those elements, what I would advise is use them in a really powerful, meaningful way. Don't just use them as set decoration, because I think that kind of normalizes things in a way that kind of makes me sick. And even this current Supreme Court ruling about abortion law, to me, the conversation about it, I'm just shocked at how much we've normalized the idea of uncles raping kids. Just because that comes up. Oh, if an uncle does that, that happens. It's like, why don't we solve that problem? Like, how come we're brushing that aside? Because we've normalized it. Like, yeah, that happens. And I just wouldn't want to contribute any more of that noise, or kind of like that kind of normalizing data to such a dark topic.
That's a really good answer. Thank you. I appreciate that. So my next question is, I love how the game encourages you to change your gameplay style as you progress. So you start out like weak and underpowered, you have to rely on stealth and a lot of running away. But by the end of the game, you're like a badass motherfucker rocking the MG55 and taking on 500 freaks of the sawmill. How was that structure incorporated into the development of the game, and how did you manage to balance it so well?
I'm shocked that I'm shocked that a lot of things came together really well, because for a while it was actually pretty terrifying. Just because we're waiting for systems to come online that might have taken a year or two, and the whole while I had to tell people, just wait. It's gonna when this Lego piece snaps in, it's just gonna look it's gonna look glorious. You'll see the X-wing that as you're assembling it, you can't notice. Sorry, that was a weird Lego reference, but yeah, like I said, I'm still shocked that it kind of came together. But really, there was a lot of iteration involved, and there was I kind of had an out, which was this design pillar, which was sandbox combat. Sandbox combat meant, hey, the player plays it their way. Whatever the player wants to do, we're not going to worry about that. If the player wants to take out a horde by sitting in a bush all day, fine. It's going to take 7 hours to do. If that's what they want to do, I'm not going to stand in the way. It would have been nice to kind of maybe shame them somehow in the game, detect that they're doing that. But really, honestly, that was my design philosophy, was like, it's an open world. The player can approach any situation from any direction. I don't have control over the moments like I used to in our previous linear games. So how that applies to the tuning of the game was knowing that there had to be a power curve. Just simply, player starts underpowered, and at the end he can be this powered. And then it's how long does it take to get there, and at which point does it kind of really become a bounty of riches, or he's basically, you don't have to get all the guns to be super powerful. At a certain point, you get about half of them, and you find the ones that work for you, and you're at the top of that power curve. And that power curve is obviously filled out by the stamina and the focus and all those other progression elements that kind of made the player stronger. But for the weapons, I just wanted them to choose what worked for them. Like the crossbow. Crossbow is a great weapon. It's a part of the fantasy that players have for an apocalyptic game. But for me, I'm like, oh yeah, like one bolt every 4 seconds. Screw that. Give me this big machine gun. And but yet at the same time, our QA guy would go through and defeat a whole horde with just the crossbow. And I'm like, yes, mission accomplished. You had a theory, you tested it, and it worked out. That's what I'm going for. And so as it applied to tuning, I was able to. I had to aggressively represent shittier tuned weapons at the beginning of the game, and kind of find a way to narratively help sell them, like that, that they're. I forget what we did, but basically we're just saying the weapons you get off of guys are out in the wild, and they're basically not tuned very well, but that's what the player has access to. And then after doing enough stuff and getting the trust and credits, then they can start to buy the good guns after they've played the game and appreciated what it was like to not have the good guns. That was really the disparity I was trying to build. And yeah, I wish I could tell you exactly how it came together. I built a spreadsheet. I would pull in game data. I would model out a lot of stuff. I would bring QA in, and I would just interrogate them about how they're playing the game with these guns, with what they thought about these things, and would kind of go back and figure out which tier it had to be in, which camp it had to be in, which story mission it was given to you as which storyline it was associated with to get it as a reward, and really. It kind of like the one thing that I do remember is I'm like, okay, end game horde stuff. And that's when we really started to kind of open up. I wanted to make sure by the time players got there that they could start to, they'd get a taste of an upgraded gun, but then they would get the big one. I think it's when I played at E3, and just got lucky, but I guess when you have 7 years to tune something, it's probably going to come together.
Yeah. How many times have you played the game, and do you have a favorite gun?
Oh God. I've played the game a lot. What I was really shocked by was after I'd finished developing it, and I know before that game came out, nobody had played the game as much as I had, especially from beginning, like contiguously from beginning to end. So I can't even count the hours, thousands. And when it came out, I figured I'd be sick of it. And for every other game I've made, I've never played them after they've come out. I've put the disc in and kind of like, oh yeah. But for this one, I didn't just play it. I fucking platinumed it. Like, and my wife would be like, "Hey, you gonna come down for dinner?" I'm like, "Just wait." And I was taking notes. And so like on my own time on weekends for weeks afterwards, I was playing the shit out of this game and having a really good time. And for me, it kind of turned into comfort food. In a lot of ways, just kind of being out in the open world, taking on hordes, just going in any direction, finding something to do, and then trying to survive it was a lot of fun, because even though my skill level was high, one of the great things about the horde is no matter what your skill level is, if you fuck up once, it starts to kind of snowball real quick. And a lot of
Mm-hmm.
the fun comes from either dying and then retrying, but it really comes from like barely surviving in a really desperate, scrappy way,
Yeah.
and then somehow coming back and prevailing on the horde. And I was experiencing all those loops, kind of like somebody who hadn't played the game or didn't know anything about it. And honestly, I haven't played it for a year. I think I dabbled a little bit when the PC came out, but what I'm really trying to do is like I'm trying to get like 4 to 5 years of separation between me and the game, and if 4 or 5 years of amnesia from the last time I played, because I would like to see what it feels like for somebody who's not that familiar with it, if that's even possible. So yeah, I've played it a lot. I got the platinum. I don't have golds in challenges because those are insane, and they're brilliant, but they're for kids. I've played them all, but to get the gold, I'm not that hardcore. So yeah, that's that. And as far as my favorite gun goes, God, it's the MG. I forget the name of it.
55.
55. Yeah,
That's my
it's that
favorite.
one. I get that thing and I fill it full. And one of the cool things is that bike, that stash you get on your bike, is a total exploit, because if you're buying ammo for lower level guns, you're actually spending more money on it. But for the higher tier guns, you're actually saving money on the bulk, because we just charged you one price for because we didn't know what guns you would have on you when you interacted with it. So, but it was cool, And once I had that and my MG55, and then I was at the sawmill, and even me, I kill almost everybody, but then I was out of everything. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go ride the bike to Iron Mike's. I went there and I bought stuff and came back and kind of mopped up the horde and everything, which was part of our design intent. And I was experiencing it like somebody who, because I normally totally obliterate the horde there really quickly, but I had to kind of break it up into two, and it was fun, and that's what we were going for.
I want to ask you about the way the missions are kind of stacked sometimes. There's a little sequence when you're at Wizard Island where you go on the run for Sarah to get the newt, and then when you come back, you get taken out to do the Tumult Horde. And it doesn't give you chance in between the two to change your loadout. That's annoyed a lot of people. And I wanted
Yeah.
to ask you about why it was designed that way and if that was on purpose to annoy people.
No, it wasn't on purpose. And on that one, those two scenes were just written in such a way that we couldn't outbox them, and we at that point we couldn't go back and redo the cinematics. So I can't remember. I mean, I know that we did it, but it wasn't something I was fighting for, or something that we had to do. And then to mitigate that, I think we threw some weapons on the ground at the start of the mission. No designer is proud of doing that, but that was we did that there. We didn't do that actually in a lot of other missions, but we put them there just kind of as an apology. So I think that's one of the things about Days Gone is the story and missions were written well before we even had usable AI. So some of the stuff that doesn't kind of quite land is sometimes attributed to that. So, but the thing that I do regret on the design side for that is not putting a fucking checkpoint somewhere in that mission. Because if you died, you had to start all the way back up on the hill, and that was the thing that was uncool to me. But given the philosophy of sandbox combat, I if I was doing the game over again and I was in a situation where somebody was proposing a mission, we're like, all right, take the player and whatever they have on them at the time, they have on them, and we just drop them in the shittiest situation possible. I'd be like, yeah, that's Days Gone, because you prepare and you go out, and what you prepare is kind of how you determine you want to play the game. And if a player I can't presume that the player didn't want those guns, or they didn't want that loadout. But the way that the game systems work is they should be able to run from something. They should be able to kite something. They should be able to, find a dead body or find a weapon in a car, or, the players could kind of like live off the land. They could discover the land would provide everything that they needed to survive that. But this mission in particular, since it was from one to the next, it was a foul on our part.
The attention to detail in the game is something I want to talk to you about next. It's absolutely phenomenal how many amazing details are put in there. Obviously, a lot of thought went into it. What are some of the little details that you found most problematic, or what are you most proud of?
I think I am really proud of the fact that we have all that in there. And one of the things, one of the other things I'm really quite proud of is the fact that we launched with a photo mode, because I knew that was going to be super important for these really cool open worlds, for this game to be able to market itself, for people to kind of, take all these great encounters that they're finding in the world and just share it and then draw more people in. So, it was a struggle near the end to get anything, to even get our existing plans finished, let alone add, a photo mode. But fortunately, we'd hired a new technical designer. He was working on the game and working on difficulty modes, because at one point we weren't going to have difficulty modes just because I was kind of a dick. And but then I came around and realized, okay, we need these. So he implemented those and he was done. And he's like, all right, I'm done. What else should I move on to? And I'm like, you have any ideas for photo mode? And he's like, Adobe Lightroom. Yeah, that's what I want to do. And I'm like, go do it. That's what we need. So I got him together with a couple, like a technical artist, engineers. Adding photo mode actually made engineers realize that the game didn't truly pause, so it would always tick. And so when you go into the menu, the world would be ticking and kind of some physics would be updating, but not like it was this really weird state that we uncovered that when we were doing photo mode, so that got fixed. And the tech art team provided some support, but I had this tech designer who he had this vision for it, and he went off and built it. And I was one of the things that was keeping me from pushing photo mode was I'm like, we need a hook. We need a unique hook, because that seems to be what every photo mode is doing these days. Like, they're going to add Spider-Man's going to add stickers to it. This game's going to do this. So what can we do? And that kind of creating your own filter, adding that advanced edit mode was something that was pretty powerful. And it was really cool because we used that tool to author the presets that came with the game. So it was loved the fact that that got created. And the fact that it revealed all of the really nice touches of the silencer having a hole burst into it once it's pristine until you fire your first shot. Then having Deacon's hands manipulating the controls and his feet on the clutch and on the brakes. It was just in his hand shifting everything, and then even the gun discipline, the trigger discipline, were things that honestly I didn't ask for. The animation team just drove it, and it's something where that's how development should work. Is everybody's so invested, they're trying to plus stuff up, and they did, and it really did pay dividends. And then the environment art team, obviously, if you look in the water, just the amount of detail that's under the water, that's actually a total magic trick, is just really impressive. So everybody was really trying to kind of every team was trying to push their field as far as possible and just look for opportunities to kind of pitch in their ideas, and we took almost everything.
It's phenomenal. Another little detail that I didn't even notice until I was researching for this interview is that the gas mileage. I talked about this all the way back in episode 12, the drifter bike episode, about how gas degrades pretty quickly and the drifter bike gets terrible mileage. I found out, and I'm actually kind of ashamed to admit that I just found this out, but it's not an oversight. It's actually part of the design. Yeah. Would you care to elaborate and explain it to us?
So, where we messed up on the messaging of the fuel system was not explaining the principle that allowed us to do it, which was when the world ends and the refineries stop making gas, within 2 years, we're out of gas. Like, it's going to evaporate if we don't use it. So it's still there, it's going to kind of work, but it's not going to be the best grade of gasoline. It's going to be kind of gross. And that was my justification for saying, yeah, shitty tuning for, shitty gas mileage because of that's how it is. We didn't message that. You know what I mean? And that would have really, by saying, hey, look, in this world, the gas is evaporating and, but in the gas and the bikes have shitty mileage because he's putting them together. Just setting up that context would have helped people understand it. But one of the things that if I had that time machine I talk about, one of the things I would do is go in and take the meter distance to a destination, and I would triple it, just so people
feel like they're traveling further.
They feel like they're traveling further, and I don't mean that as a way of kind of pulling the wool over their eyes. Why I think we could have gotten away with that was basically third-person scale is very weird. I think Days Gone is really only like 3 miles wide, but it feels much bigger than that. So in my mind, you're covering more ground than the game really says. Plus, I also needed a starter bike that kind of explained how bad it was. It demonstrated how bad this could be if you didn't take care of it, if you didn't start to do these open world loops and then upgrade your bike. So it was really it was kind of like detuned early to really push you into these systems, but also to give you the sense of survival, what it would be like in the apocalypse. We're not getting brand new Teslas. everything's kind of duct taped together, and something that depends on gas, which is rapidly evaporating, was something that just it made a lot of sense to me, and I wish we could have messaged it better.
Yeah. Yeah, when I found that out, it blew my mind. I'm like, of course, I don't know why I didn't think about it. It makes perfect sense. It does track. I just assumed that the bike mileage was just a game mechanic. It was the one thing that I was like, well, I'm just assuming that's just what they have to do because it's a video game. And then I read that interview and I was like, oh, no, it does make sense.
Yeah.
It's just another great detail you put in. You just didn't, like you say, didn't message it quite so well.
Yeah. And, one of the things about the bike in general was we knew that the game was going to be kind of special because Mad Max was a vehicle game where you did have to, there was some level of fuel management. I played it for like 10 hours. I can't remember what it all was. But in doing Days Gone, kind of giving the player the one bike, for us, that meant, okay, no more of this disposable shit from Grand Theft Auto, and that stopped us from doing stuff like uh, basically using the motorcycle to put a bomb on and drive it into a group of people. I'm like, no, you wouldn't do that to your baby. Like, like it's a biker has a special relationship with his bike. They just don't do it. Plus he's screwing himself out of transportation afterwards. So, as we started to kind of define the bike and what was appropriate for it versus not, really trying to bridge the survival gameplay pillar, or the theme of the game being survival, was something that I'm like, at a certain point it dawned on me, the bike is essential for survival. The bike is essential for survival. What does that mean? It means, okay, yeah, you need if you don't have your bike, it's going to be really dangerous out there. Oh, you know what? If the only way for you to reload all of your ammo at once out in the field is from a stash on the back of your bike, there you go. Having to have your bike and sufficient fuel and have it be repaired to make it to to fast travel somewhere. All these things were counterintuitive choices that you don't make for a lot. Like if you would have told me before I made Days Gone that I would have made those choices, I would have said, get out of here. But in Days Gone, given all these parameters, it made perfect sense. And more importantly, it filled me with confidence knowing that, like, this is the right thing to do, because every designer I talk to, everybody I talk to who has to implement this, is going to fight me on it, and I'm going to have to believe in it, and I did, because it had that governing principle of the bike is essential for survival, and where that really kind of helped me. So these weren't super tough fights, by the way, but there's always resistance that you're getting.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a moment, again, maybe like 9 to 10 months before launch, that I'm embarrassed I didn't think of this beforehand, but a lot of the feedback we were getting from the focus test people were, man, this save game sucks. Like, I died and I respawned here, and it's not where I thought I should be. This game's terrible. And in my opinion, the game was actually bending over backwards behind the scenes to autosave for players and put them back in the best possible state. It was doing a great job. But when you are only 90% accurate, that's not enough. So that final 10% was basically enough to kind of tell people that it all sucked. And we had the same user test people from Guerrilla, Horizon Zero Dawn, the same researchers were in charge of our game that had kind of led Horizon, and they couldn't share information with us without permission from Guerrilla. But we were getting this feedback, and I just asked them, I'm like, how do people feel about the campfires in Horizon? And they're like, oh, they fucking love those. Once they loved them, and they stopped complaining about the save games because they were the ones responsible for it. And I'm like, that's what we got to do, But I can't steal the fires from Horizon. I'm like, oh, but I got this motorcycle. I can make it a virtual fire. That's the only place you can save at. And I should have thought about that sooner. I really should have rolled that into the bike is essential for survival. But moving the save game to a manual input that the player had to do at the bike saved us all of the problems that came with disappointing some people on save games. But it also it really strengthened the importance of the bike and made it the center of a lot of the survival elements. And I call it a survival game. But we even early on had Deacon eating food and drinking water, and it didn't read. It didn't land well. It came off as pretty kludgy that, he eats a candy bar or something, and all of a sudden he just got all the bullets go away. Like, it's, and I know that's fine for games, but it didn't feel fine for us. But I knew we needed survival stuff, and I'm like, let's push it all onto the bike, so that's why you have to repair the bike, and why you have to take care of the gas. And, yeah. So all the decisions about the bike and kind of pushing things towards that is one of the things that before I did it, I never would have thought I would ever make those decisions. But I'm really, really satisfied and happy with how much I stuck to my guns. And I think that ultimately what that meant was Days Gone is a great game. It's a flawed game. It's whatever, but why it's great for the people who think it's great is because of the adherence to the principles that I'm talking about. By Garvin being so strong-willed with the journey that he's on, because he got a lot of guff and a lot of people saying, "What about this? What about that?" And he had a vision and he stuck to it. He thought it through. There was no end he hadn't accounted for. And on the design side, we were doing that as much as possible, just trying to kind of figure out, like, every decision. We're not making any decisions randomly. We're not including something from another game just because. We're going to bring things in from other games that make sense for this fantasy and this experience that we're trying to build, or things that solve problems for us, like the Horizon campfire. So yeah, I'm really proud of just how the game came together, because it took so long, but also all these choices that made the game small they are what made it big. Like it spoke to you in a way that, because we couldn't compete with all of the pyrotechnics and explosions from a Far Cry 3, a Far Cry game. So we just had to kind of go with something a much more relatable. And things kind of like that were some other decisions were, you can't blind fire on the bike. Like you can't just shoot you can't blind fire from cover. You can't blind fire after, when a horde is chasing you. And that was the thing that people bugged me for like 5 years, saying, "When are we gonna get blind fire?" I'm like, "We're not." You know what I mean? Like we're trying to sell a world of limited ammo, but we really can't. We have infinite ammo, so we just need to make players we need to make them spend bullets hard. Make it difficult for them to spend bullets to use them. And you could either shoot in the open world, use your guns too much, you're going to create too much noise, you're going to bring more trouble down on you. So that kind of satisfied one part of it. But the shooting, the blind firing, just to me kind of said bullets are infinite. And that was tonally the wrong thing to do. So a lot of little decisions like that, I'm just really proud of, because they were principled. They were driven from principles. There was oftentimes a fight to kind of get everybody on board with it, but I think that it came together in this nice kind of recipe at the end.
You mentioned John Garvin just a second ago. You worked with him since Siphon Filter back in 1999. What made the two of you such a great team?
It's a great question. I think that we are. I mean, we're similar in some ways and vastly different, but both of us have relatively thick skin, thin skin for some things, but for brutal honesty and truth. There's John is a guy who he loves a good fight, and he's a really accomplished guy, and he will let a junior artist on day one come in and challenge every decision that he's made, and John would happily engage in that argument and can oftentimes convince people. So he's just somebody who's he's a force of nature. He can accomplish a lot by himself. He's got a lot of great ideas. We riff together really well. Like, he doesn't take most of my ideas, but every now and then I kind of plant a seed that gets in there and it kind of works out. But really, the thing that I really love about John is just he's got a healthy ego, like we all do, but he also doesn't at the same time too. He doesn't, it's a really weird dichotomy, but that's what I love about him. Like, I think some of the biggest fights I've ever had with a person in my life have been with John, but some of the best moments I've ever had have been with John after that. So it's I just think that we get along because we both can be super honest with one another.
Yeah. The Days Gone fan community is hands down the best gaming community out there. And I hope you know how much love there is for the game you created. What do you want to say to the ever-growing community of fans?
Thank you. I mean, the Days Gone fans are the best fans in my book. It's, obviously every game's got them, but there's something about Days Gone that I was just expecting to get hammered on social media, because trolls are out there, and there's been very little of that. And there's just been any time that I express, like, just even in my personal life or in my career, if I tweet something, they just swarm and they come in and they support me or build me up or whatever. And then just even with the ones that don't engage with me, yeah, we touched a lot of people, and it's really nice to see just to see somebody kind of respond to the work that we've created and be such good people about it. You know what I mean? Like, there's you hop into a Facebook thread, sometimes you'll see that game, this other game sucks, Days Gone is great. Like, they're pretty good people, and I stand by my initial statement. Days Gone fans are the best. They seem to be really good people that obviously love my game. That makes me like them. But
people of good taste.
They were people who gave the game a shot. I think that this is the important thing.
Yeah.
They're the people who judged it on their own. They didn't listen to the reviews necessarily, or maybe I don't know exactly, but they stuck with it and they appreciated what we had. It's everything that the game isn't that obvious in the first 10 hours. You really have to kind of sink into it and then let it kind of take hold. And that's what all these people did. They had faith in us and they gave it enough time to kind of see the fruits of our labor.
Mm-hmm. All right, I've got one last question for you. If you found yourself in the world of Days Gone, how would you fare and which camp would you join?
Awesome question. I would fare very well for a while. I would,
you said that with such confidence.
Yeah, no, what I would do is, I talk about this fantasy that we all have about the apocalypse and what we would do and whatever. And, right away, I think that I would know that you have to be hardcore, that you have to do some stuff that you probably wouldn't do. I know enough about that. Whether I could do it or not, who knows? But I would probably try to find some place. I would do one of two things. Here's what I would do. I would try to be Iron Mike and then fail so miserably I'd probably wind up like Copeland. Like I would start with the best intentions.
You'd be Iron Mike in your head, but everyone else is like,
starting out as that, and then just as, I don't know. It's I don't really know who I would be, but I would definitely think that I was Iron Mike, but I think that the apocalypse would tell me about myself. And I would learn who I really was. Am I a Ripper, or am I schizo? Am I part of the militia? What am I? But I definitely would try to build a community of people that all had great skills, and more importantly, we'd have to kill all the tall people because they need too many calories. So I've researched the internet, and I know that if you kill all the tall guys, you don't need the tall guys to fight tall guys because you've killed them all, and then there's more protein to go around for everybody.
Wait, are you talking about cannibalism?
No,
you're going to eat all the tall people?
I'm just saying, like, if we kill a deer and some guy comes in and he needs 3,000 calories a day, and the rest of us need 15, that's a problem. It's controversial, but I would actually, once the adrenaline rush wore off of living in the apocalypse, I would just be really bored. I'm a city boy. I love all the creature comforts that we have, and it would be rough to lose those. So that's why I like to keep it in the fantasy space, not the reality space. But I think that there would be no other kind of test to tell you who you were as a person than the apocalypse.
Right. Okay, a few quick reminders before we wrap up. You can support the Days Gone podcast via buymeacoffee.com/daysgonepod. All contributions are greatly appreciated and really help with the overhead costs of running the podcast. And I want to give a big shout out to James Guan for contributing. It is greatly appreciated. Thank you so much. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share so more people can find the show. Jeff, on behalf of everyone listening to this, thank you for talking with me today, and a huge thank you for making a game that has touched so many hearts and quite literally changed people's lives, myself included. You are an absolute legend.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. And again, congratulations on the show. Thank you for doing this. It's a great resource, and I appreciate what you're putting back into the community for. So best of luck and congratulations.
You can email me your thoughts, comments, opinions, and counter-arguments at daysgonepod@gmail.com. You can also find me moderating the Days Gone subreddit. Thanks for listening. Weaver out.